There is something inside your house that is making you sick, holding you back and blocking the blessings that God wants to pour out on your life. And the worst part, you don't even suspect it. Seriously, you may be praying, fasting, asking for guidance, but doors remain closed, your health continues to decline, the atmosphere becomes tense, fights arise out of nowhere, and you've even thought, is there something wrong with me? But what if the problem is not with you, but with some objects inside your home? It may seem like an exaggeration, but there are things that seem harmless, beautiful, or even sentimental, but they are attracting illness, confusion, spiritual fatigue, and even spiritual attacks into your home. And as long as you continue to live with these objects, the spiritual atmosphere of your home will remain charged, blocking your emotional, financial, and even physical life. In this video, I'll show you what are these 5 dangerous objects, how they affect your life without you realizing it, and what to do about it. Break once and for all this cycle of spiritual stagnation, fights, illnesses, and lack of peace, all based on spiritual principles used by great men of faith who understand how God's presence can be impeded by simple details of our daily lives. Watch until the end, because the last object on the list may be right in front of you now, and maybe he's the reason so much goes wrong. Now you know what was holding you back without realizing it. With this revelation, you have the power to cleanse your home, restore your peace, and open doors that have been closed for too long. This content showed you what no one else told you, and if it helped you, it's only fair that more people have access to this truth too. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and spread this knowledge. Transformation begins with simple actions, and this is one of them. Here, each video is a step closer to the liberation you deserve to experience. It's easy for us to think that faith is just about praying, fasting, and going to church, right? But what many people don't realize is that the environment we live in also says a lot about what we carry inside. And not only that, it directly influences how things flow or stall in our lives. Some people are always saying that life is stuck, that prayer isn't working, that their emotions are shaken, and that no matter how hard they try, nothing changes. And look how curious. Sometimes the answer is right under our noses, right in our own home. It's like being in a leaky boat, trying to row harder instead of plugging the hole. The truth is, your environment may be fueling an invisible cycle of spiritual blockages, emotional illness, and even separation from God's presence, and no one talks about it clearly. Have you ever walked into a place and immediately felt a heaviness in the air, a discomfort you can't explain, but that tightens your chest, leaves you restless, a little dizzy, without knowing why? Sometimes it's not even a messy or dirty place, but there's something there that makes you want to leave quickly. This kind of feeling has a name: spiritual atmosphere. Yes, there is a spiritual climate in places, and it's formed by everything present there. The words spoken, the feelings nurtured, the attitudes repeated, and surprisingly, even the objects within the space. Does it sound exaggerated? Maybe it is now, but once you understand how it works, it all starts to make sense. Our home should be a refuge, a place where the soul breathes, where faith grows, where rest arrives. But what happens is that often we turn our homes into a silent battlefield, and we don't even realize it. The hustle and bustle of everyday life makes us slack on things we should be watching. And I'm not talking about becoming neurotic or paranoid, but rather about having discernment. What you allow into your home, be it an image, a word, a sound, an energy, can both strengthen God's presence in the space and open the way for all kinds of bad things. And this isn't mystical talk, it's a spiritual reality at play. The greatest spiritual leaders who have shaped generations have always taught that faith needs to be alive, practical, and exercised in all aspects of life, including the environment where we live. There's no point in praying for healing, peace, or prosperity and keeping things that generate spiritual contamination in your home. Faith works like an antenna that connects with heaven. But if the environment is full of interference, the connection weakens. Have you ever noticed that some people pray and feel God's presence strongly, and others who pray and feel empty? Often, this has to do with the environment where the prayer is being said. A spiritually charged environment neutralizes even the power of the word. It's heavy, but it's real. And you know what's even crazier? Sometimes these spiritual interferences are found in small, seemingly harmless things. An ornament you received, from someone and never liked, but kept out of politeness, a gift from someone who once hurt you, an object with a strange symbol that you found beautiful but don't know its origin, an old book, a childhood memory, an amulet said to bring good luck. All of these carry spiritual memory. And if the origin is dubious or if it's connected to suffering, hurt, idolatry, or practices contrary to your faith, it could be draining the energy from your home without you realizing it. And it's not just energy in the figurative sense, it's a true spiritual presence. The spiritual world is more sensitive than it seems, and the enemy takes advantage of any gap. That's why it's so important to stop and do an honest analysis. What's the atmosphere in your home like today? Do you feel peace when you enter it? Or do you feel a weight you can't explain? Can you pray there freely? Or do you feel stuck, your mind wandering, your prayers failing? Start observing. Sometimes the blockage you thought was emotional or spiritual may be linked to the simple fact that you're living with objects that carry an atmosphere contrary to God's presence. And it doesn't even have to be something explicitly evil. Sometimes all that's missing is discernment. Now, answer me honestly in the comments. When you think of your home today, what word comes to mind? Comment on the word environment down here so I know you're with me on this journey. Because look, once you understand the power your environment has over your spiritual life, there's no way to ignore it. You start to see things differently. You start to notice details that previously went unnoticed. And this frees you. You understand that praying alone isn't enough. You need to clear the ground. It's like planting a good seed in contaminated soil. It tries to grow, but it withers. Now when the soil is clean, cared for, watered, then everything begins to flourish. The same happens with your spiritual, emotional, and even financial life. When the environment cooperates, blessings flow. When it doesn't, everything stalls. And perhaps that's why even when you're doing everything right, you still feel like something is holding you back. And this brings us to an even more delicate point, because there are people who are living with true spiritual blockers in their homes, without even knowing it. Objects that carry a spiritual root that directly conflicts with the Christian faith, and which are there, exposed or hidden, fueling a spiritual presence that impedes healing, delays the promise, and even confuses discernment. And then the person begins to doubt their faith, question God, and lose heart. But God has never stopped working. The problem is that you're trying to hear His voice amidst a field of interference. And how are you going to hear clearly if the environment doesn't cooperate? The next point of this conversation is precisely this. Now that you understand that your home's environment may be undermining your faith, draining your energy, and creating an atmosphere where blessings cannot linger, it's time to face one of the greatest silent villains, objects that carry spiritual weight hidden behind a harmless appearance. And I want you to be careful, because this point catches many people off guard. It's all too easy to fall into this trap when we lack discernment, and the truth is that many things that seem cute, cultural, or just decorative are actually creating a field of spiritual contamination within your home. You know that ornament you bought or received from someone and thought was different, kind of exotic, but you didn't quite know what it meant. An African mask, a tiny Buddha, a dragon sculpture, a hand with a protective symbol, an evil eye hanging on the door. All of these may seem harmless, and many people say they're just art or travel stuff. But spiritually speaking, these objects carry symbols, energies, and representations that often have absolutely nothing to do with the presence of God. On the contrary, many have roots in occult practices, religions contrary to the Christian faith, beliefs linked to idolatry, invoking spirits, and other spiritual connections that open gaps within their homes. And this has nothing to do with cultural prejudice, much less with judging those who practice it. The issue here is spiritual. We're talking about objects that carry deep spiritual meanings, whether you believe in them or not. The spiritual world doesn't depend on your opinion to function. These objects act as points of contact, as channels, and if this channel is connected to something that doesn't come from God, guess what enters with it? This is precisely why often the home atmosphere begins to feel tense. Arguments escalate, insomnia sets in, anxiety grows, finances stall, and the person doesn't understand why. They keep praying, they keep fasting, but maintains a silent alliance within her home with something that contradicts her own faith. And the most dangerous part is that these objects were often received as gifts from loved ones. So, there's an emotional attachment, a fond memory, and a sense of affection involved. But spiritually speaking, human affection doesn't cancel out the impact it can have on the environment. How many times have you felt something bothering you in a certain corner of the house, but ignored it because it was a gift from someone, or because it came from an important trip? Pay attention to this. The spiritual world operates by principles, not by feelings. There is no point in justifying with the heart something that spiritually is attracting confusion. Maybe now you're starting to remember some specific pieces in your home, right? A hanging necklace, a statuette on the living room rack, a painting with images that you look at now and no longer feel so comfortable with. The tip here is simple. If you have doubts, it's already a sign. If something in your home makes you question, feel uncomfortable, or if you can't pray freely around that object, it's best to remove it. There's no point in insisting on keeping it out of emotional or aesthetic attachment. The peace of your home is worth much more than that. By the way, comment below. Discernment. If this point made you reflect on a specific object, this will show me that you are paying attention and experiencing this process with me. Now, there's a detail that almost no one notices, and that often goes unnoticed, even by those who already have an active spiritual life. Sometimes these objects are placed with good intentions. People think they're protecting their home by hanging that symbol on the door, or they think they're paying homage to a culture, or they even believe they're just decorating. But in the spiritual world, good intention does not cancel out consequences. That's why so many homes that look beautiful on the outside are suffering on the inside. The atmosphere is fraught, and no one understands why. But when you start doing a real spiritual cleansing, the results are visible, and it doesn't take long. Some people have told me that after removing a simple statuette, the atmosphere in their home changed completely. Their sleep improved, the couple's arguments stopped, and their children began to calm down, not because the statuette was magical, but because it carried a presence contrary to what they were praying to experience. When the object was removed, the interference also disappeared. And then prayer began to flow, peace returned, and faith was rekindled. It's a matter of spiritual alignment. Either your home is aligned with God's presence, or it's giving way to that which opposes it. And in that case, there is no neutrality. And look, this is just the beginning, because the next object on our list is even more common, even more subtle, and even more present in practically every home, even the most spiritual ones. An item that is often in the most visible place in the house, and which, depending on where and how it is positioned, can act as a true blocker of peace, emotional health, and communion within the home. And he is there, now, by your side, and you probably never suspected, because the next item is so common, so ubiquitous, that it's become almost part of every home's decor. But the problem is precisely this. Nobody questions, nobody pays attention, and then it stays, silent, discreet, but full of influence. We're talking about something everyone has at home, but almost no one understands the spiritual weight it carries. The mirror. That's right. It may seem strange at first, but once you understand what's happening, there's no way to ignore it. The mirror, in practice, is not just an object for grooming or checking one's appearance. It reflects, and everything it reflects also magnifies, moves, and intensifies. In the spiritual realm, it functions as a powerful energy channel, and depending on where it's positioned, what it reflects, and how it's used, it can either attract blessings or multiply confusion. And no, it's not superstition, it's spiritual observation. Various spiritual leaders throughout history, especially those who work with inner healing, intercessory prayer, and spiritual warfare, have warned about mirrors in certain places in the home, two spots in particular, the bedroom and the front door. Starting with the bedroom, you know that mirror facing the bed? The one you wake up to, and it's right there, staring back at you? Or, worse, the one you suddenly see yourself in at night with the lights off? Well, yes. Besides affecting emotional rest, because the mirror activates the environment, makes the space lively, and reflects movement, it also influences spiritual sleep. It's as if the soul can't fully rest, and what's more, in many cases, couples who have the mirror facing the bed face relationship problems, fights for no reason, emotional withdrawal, and even blocks in intimacy. Coincidence? Maybe. But is it really worth the risk? Now think with me. What if that mirror still reflects disorganization, thrown clothes, the open bathroom door, or a corner of the house you don't even like to look at? All of this is being amplified. The spiritual environment of the home is sensitive, and when an object reflects confusion, clutter, or stagnant energy, it is spreading this to the rest of the environment. So, a simple and practical tip is remove the mirror from in front of your bed, or cover it at night. Try it for a week and observe how you sleep, how you wake up, and how your mood changes. You'll be amazed at the difference. And it doesn't stop there. Mirrors at the entrance of the house also have a huge impact. Have you ever seen those houses with a mirror right by the door as if to reflect whoever enters? Well, that mirror also reflects the energy that arrives and bounces back. Sometimes peace tries to enter, but bumps into that reflection and returns. It seems exaggerated, but once you understand how it works, you'll never look at a mirror the same way again. And let's be honest, anything that interferes with the flow of God's presence within your home needs to be carefully observed. It's not paranoia, it's care. By the way, comment below the word mirror. So I know you're connecting with this conversation and that this topic has made you reflect. Your interaction helps spread this content to more people who, like you, are seeking to free their homes from everything that blocks God's presence. And you might not even realize it, but just by moving this mirror you can feel enormous relief, a lightness you haven't felt in a long time. Because spiritual peace begins with simple, practical, and conscious actions. But hey, if you think things were intense by now, just wait until you see what comes next. The next item is even more emotional, more delicate, and harder to pinpoint, because it's usually accompanied by pain, longing, and a sincere attempt to keep alive a memory of the past. But the effect it has on your life may be holding you back exactly where you most need to break free. And that's exactly why this next item is so dangerous. It disguises itself as affection, longing, and memory, but in practice, it's preventing you from moving forward. Many people won't like to hear this, but the truth sets you free, and you need to face this head-on if you truly want to restore peace and God's presence in your home. We're talking about those objects that belong to people who had already died or had gone through a lot of pain. It could be a piece of clothing, jewelry, a piece of furniture, a letter, a photo, an accessory, anything that remains after a loss, a trauma, or an emotionally difficult time. Of course, keeping a memory of someone we love is not a sin, it is not wrong, but there is a very fine line between tribute and emotional and spiritual prison. When you keep objects that came loaded with pain, suffering, loss, or even a traumatic death, you may, without realizing it, be maintaining an atmosphere of mourning and stagnation within your home. It's as if that room, that closet, or that object remains there, emitting a constant reminder of something that has passed. But this prevents God's newness from entering. And you know what's even more cruel? Often you're praying for renewal, for healing, for progress, but you continue to harbor memories that keep your heart from breathing. This is where many people get stuck, because the attachment is strong. Some people keep the clothes of their mother who passed away, the watch of their father who suffered for years in a hospital bed, the bed of their grandmother who battled cancer, the dress of their daughter who passed away too young. I understand. The pain is real, but do you know what's also real? The spiritual impact these memories have when not handled wisely. What should be a caress becomes an anchor, and it's not just about longing, it's about weight. The atmosphere in your home needs to be light, available, and free for God's presence to move. But when you keep objects that keep you trapped in suffering, sadness, or trauma, you end up building an invisible altar to pain, and the pain begins to live with you. And the worst part is that sometimes these objects have been stored away for years. You don't even remember they're there anymore, but they continue to have a spiritual effect. Remember how we said everything carries an atmosphere? Well, yes, that corner of the house that no one touches, that closet full of old things, that box under the bed, it could be charged. And no matter how much you pray, God does not force entry where pain has been enthroned. He respects your time, but he also expects you to trust him enough to give it to him. It's not about throwing it away coldly. It's about understanding that the most important thing about the person who's gone never been in that object. It's in what she left in you. Faith, love, teachings, examples. That, yes, remains. The rest you can let go. And there's more. Sometimes the problem isn't even someone who has already died, but someone who hurt you deeply. You may be keeping a ring, a letter, a gift from someone who humiliated you, betrayed you, emotionally abused you, and you leave it there as if it were just a memory. But spiritually, it is a portal of pain that remains open inside your home, and as long as you maintain these visible or hidden bonds, you are feeding a spiritual cycle that prevents a new beginning. Some people say, "Oh, but it's just an object." Is that really true? So why can't you let it go? Why does the mere thought of rummaging through that box make your chest tighten? Why do you freeze when you get near that cabinet? Because it's not just an object, it's an emotional and spiritual bond, and that's exactly why it needs to be treated seriously. When you let go of it, it's like an invisible weight lifted from your shoulders. It's liberating. And do you know what happens? Next, you breathe better, you sleep better, you pray more clearly, your mind becomes quiet, peace returns. It's like opening a window after years of everything being closed. The light enters. Now comment below the word release. If this topic touched something deep inside you, write it down, because when we write, we begin to name what needs to come out, and this simple action already begins to move the spiritual world in your favor. I'm reading all the comments and following you closely in this process. Your transformation begins with this decision, and speaking of transformation, the next item you'll discover is present in practically every home. It creeps in, disguised as entertainment, culture, leisure, or art. But when you start paying attention, you realize that he is contaminating not only the environment, but also the mind, sleep, and even faith of those who live there. And the scariest thing is that he is usually in the most visible and frequented place in the house, in the living room, or in the bedroom, or both, sometimes everywhere. And it creeps in slowly, almost stealthily, with phrases like, "Oh, this is just for fun. It's just a movie. It's just a book. It's just a pretty painting," and so on. Books, films, music, paintings, and decorative objects with a negative charge or distorted message begin to take up space in your home, and along with them comes a flood of emotional, mental, and spiritual disturbance that seems subtle but silently destroys. Think about it. What was the last movie you watched before bed? The last book you left on your nightstand? Or even the painting hanging on your living room wall that has a heavy, dark, or even aggressive image? Sometimes we don't even realize it, but the content we consume, and especially the content we leave inside our homes, shapes the spiritual atmosphere of the environment. And this isn't moralistic talk. This is a matter of vigilance. There are homes that lack peace, not because there's a lack of prayers, but because there is spiritual filth disguised as art, pop culture, or harmless entertainment. Seriously, I've heard of people suffering from insomnia, nightmares, and anxiety, and after a sincere conversation about the topic, they decided to remove horror movies, books about witchcraft, paintings with sad or distorted scenes, and music that promoted pain, betrayal, and hatred from their homes. And do you know what happened? They slept peacefully for the first time in months, because all of this has an impact. Your mind is a seedbed, and what you put inside your home penetrates directly into your mind and spirit. Music that seems innocent, but repeats phrases of despair, anger, and loneliness, creates a spiritual frequency within the environment, and then the person wonders why they live in anguish, stressed, with no desire to pray, no focus, no clarity. Now, imagine living daily with images of war, pain, death, violence, magic, betrayal, or idolatry. Even if you're not focusing on them all the time, the environment is already permeated with that information. The soul feels it, the spirit perceives it, God perceives it too, and all of this builds up like a spiritual fog, hindering prayer, distorting perception, and blocking sensitivity. Sometimes the problem isn't your weak faith, is the excess of interference in your environment. And look at this crazy thing. We worry so much about what we eat, what we wear, what we post on social media, but he almost never stops to think about what he lets live inside his own home, that collection of books you no longer read, but which deal with occult themes, your favorite series that normalizes adultery, violence, theft, and murder, the abstract painting that actually contains hidden spiritual symbols you never even knew existed. All of this undermines your spiritual authority without you even realizing it. It's like praying with the tap running nearby. The water of faith enters, but it runs down the drain without effect. And Here comes a point that really touches me. How can you expect the Holy Spirit to inhabit a place you yourself have turned into a showcase for everything that offends His presence? It's tough, I know, but it's necessary. There's no point in asking for blessings, healing, deliverance, or peace if within your home you give more space to content that promotes pain, doubt, and sin than to God's presence. Your home needs to be a place where peace is felt, where the soul breathes, where faith is strengthened. And it starts with conscious choices. What goes in, what stays, what you allow to remain. By the way, comment below the word cleaning, so I know you understand the depth of this. This cleansing isn't physical, it's spiritual, and only those who have done it know the power it has. When you start selecting what will stay in your environment based on what attracts or repels the presence of God, the change is real. You begin to feel lightness, clarity, discernment, and this is reflected in everything: relationships, finances, health, prayer, because the atmosphere changes, and where there is peace, God remains. Now, the next item on our list may seem like the most harmless of all, so common, so forgotten that it's often just thrown in a corner, gathering dust, broken and useless. But what many people don't know is that it doesn't just take up space, it slows down the movement of life, blocks the flow, and creates a stagnation that spreads to every area of the house and your soul. And that's where people stumble the most. They think the problem lies in the big things, in the difficult situations, in the visible spiritual attacks, and they forget that what paralyzes many lives is hidden under the table, behind the door, inside drawers or on top of cabinets. Broken, unused, damaged, forgotten, accumulated objects. Yes, what seems like just clutter or old stuff can actually be blocking the movement of your life and contaminating the environment of your home in a much more serious way than you imagine. And it's not just about organization, it goes much deeper. The Word teaches us that God is a God of order, and everything that deviates from this will sooner or later generate confusion, stagnation, emotional exhaustion, spiritual weight. When your home is full of stagnant, broken, or unnecessary things, it is telling the spiritual world there is no room for anything new here. And how can you expect prosperity to arrive, for God's newness to settle in, for blessings to flourish, if the environment is filled with the old, the useless, and what no longer serves? How many times have you kept a pot without a lid, thinking it might be useful one day? A broken blender you promised to fix 3 years ago? That box of cables and chargers that don't even work anymore, but you're too afraid to throw away? Clothes that haven't fit for years, but you keep them just in case? All of these things add up. A stagnant energy field inside your home, and spiritually, this stagnant energy blocks your flow of blessings. Not to mention the feelings that hide in these things. Attachment, scarcity, fear of loss, difficulty letting go of the past. Do you see how everything is connected? And that's where one of the most powerful teachings we learn from great men of faith comes in. The spiritual world responds to practical attitudes. There's no point in praying for renewal if you don't create space for the new to arrive. There's no point in calling for change if you continue to cling to everything that's outlived its usefulness, including objects. When you take this step of purging, donating, and throwing away what no longer makes sense, you are freeing up physical, emotional, and spiritual space. And this activates something inside you that goes far beyond cleaning. It's like you're saying, "And now I'm ready." You know that cluttered room you don't even enter anymore? That closet with things that only serve to accumulate mold and visual weight? That corner of the house you avoid looking at? It all speaks. It speaks to your soul. It speaks to your energy. It speaks to the spiritual world. Homes with a lot of clutter tend to have a heavier, slower atmosphere, with more conflict. Have you ever noticed that where there's a lot of clutter, prayer doesn't flow? Your mind gets confused, patience disappears, peace vanishes. And the cruelest part, you start to think the problem is you. But sometimes, what is draining your strength is the environment around you, laden with past weight and broken things. Of course, there are people who say, "Oh, but I don't have time to organize this right now." And that's okay. Start slowly. 1 corner a day, 1 drawer, 1 shelf. But start. Because every useless object you remove is one less spiritual burden within your home. And it's not just about Marie Kondo-style organization, but about making way for what God wants to do. Stagnation doesn't start from the outside in. It starts inside, in the invisible. And when you break free from it, everything starts to flow. Prayer gains strength, thoughts clear, spirit returns, doors open. Now you understand why so many things were stuck, even with prayer, faith, and effort. This content showed you what no one talks about, the invisible details that block God's presence within your home. And if this cleared your mind, brought you relief, and made you look around with new eyes, it's because the moment of change has arrived. Today, you took a step that many people don't even know they need to take, and that alone makes you a person who carries transformation. By liking this video and subscribing to the channel, you help this truth reach more homes that also need to breathe peace again. Write your message in the comments below, release, because it marks what has just begun in your life.